You're okay, Penny. This is Amy Laura Hall, and I am recording my own best words at this time about an essay that I published when I first began as a scholar. It was one of several essays I was working on in 1999, from 1998 to 1999, when I was a graduate student at Yale. And this particular essay, which is on the word agape, is one that I assign frequently to people who wonder why I teach close reading. I mean, I don't assign it, but I recommend it because it helps some people who read my writing and wonder why I teach ethics the way I do. And this particular essay is published in, and I'm going to give you the particulars now. This particular essay I entitled Complicating the Command, Agape in Scriptural Context. So Complicating the Command, Agape in Scriptural Context. It was published in the Annual of the Society of Christian Ethics in 1999. It's volume 19, pages 97 to 113. Okay. So I'm not going to read through this essay, but I am going to try to explain why this essay is a helpful way to begin thinking about love and God and neighbor. I'm being awkward about this because I was just sent an email telling me that if I post for public view any videos that pertain to my teaching, I will be wasting student tuition dollars because I've put them in a way that I put my words in a way that doesn't require tuition dollars. I don't even know how fully to process what I was just sent, but nice passive voice. Notice I just used passive voice. Don't do that unless you want to create a sense of mystery. I can post another video in general for a general readership, a general viewership about passive voice and why not to use it unless you want to create a sense of mystery. Someone may have possibly sent me an email. That wasn't passive voice. That was being, kind of diplomatic. Anyway, here are my own best words about why I, way back when I was a child, chose to write an essay about the word agape in Scripture. In my experience before 1999, I had found that there was a whole academic enterprise in Christian ethics to try to crystallize exactly what Christian love, or often the word used is the Greek word agape for Christian love. So what exactly does Christian love mean? And I, being an annoying Sunday school participant in every class I was in at Yale, I would ask, which love, which passage are we talking about? And the book that people eventually explained to me that I needed to read and take in and consider is a book by a scholar named Anders Nygren, I think. Anders Nygren. If I'm mispronouncing his name, please forgive me. I mispronounced his name many times when I was at Yale. But I read the book Agape and Eros. That is right. It's been a long time. Yeah, we're going to go with it. I read Anders Nygren about Agape and Eros when I was at Yale, and I thought, this is a mismatch. This scholar, whatever it was he was trying to do with his book, he didn't write about love in Scripture or the Christian tradition. He had a very particular way of thinking about how to do a theological or scriptural investigation into the explanation of love and how you get love right. What exactly is Christian love? So I wrote this essay in part because I was already at that time a grown-up, at least sort of. I was young, but I already knew that love was way too complicated to find some kind of essence that would explain Christian love for all time, for all people, in every situation. And I'm still proud of that essay, because I was taking on, as I was doing so, I was taking on some of the heavy hitters of baseball, right? Baseball metaphor. Some scholars, very senior scholars at the time, but I didn't know I was doing it in a way that would be annoying, but I just was asking questions, my own best questions about the actual texts that we were actually supposed to be reading in order to think about Christian love. So one of the things that happened is, it's one of the beautiful things that can happen in a library, and someday things will happen again with other people in a library. We are in pause, but it's an intermission. Someday things will happen again in person in a library where we can talk to other people. So one of the things that happened in a library at Yale, it was the Yale Divinity School library, was that I said to one of my previous instructors in Hebrew Bible Old Testament that I was trying to figure out how to explain why what Anders Nygren had done in his classic book, Eros and Agape, or Agape and Eros, whatever it's called. You can look it up. What I wanted to explain why I didn't think he'd gotten it right. He did something, he shouldn't have even tried to get it right. Maybe that's something I should say real clearly for those of you who don't have any idea what I'm talking about. The word love in, let's say, the NRSV, let's just stick with that. I won't go off for the moment for how creepy the various paraphrase other things are that are being shared as if they're, it takes a team to translate from the various languages. Anybody who says that they can translate by themselves a whole thing is probably delusional. So I said to this former professor while I was walking around Yale Divinity School trying to find the precise place in the library where I could look up different words for love in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, she said, well, you need to look at the Septuagint. And I wish, now I'm blanking on her name. I hope I have her name as a thank you in one of the footnotes that I have in the essay. But she said you need to look at the Septuagint, because she said the Septuagint, which dang it, I can't spell very well. The Septuagint was it is the version of the Hebrew Bible that, at least at that time in 1999, most scholars believed was the version of the Hebrew Bible that New Testament writers were accessing, were reading, were thinking about, were hearing, because there were various different ways that people were receiving words. It wasn't just from reading. You might hear the words, but the Septuagint was the translation of the Hebrew Bible that scholars, at least in 1999, believed, at least at Yale, and the Yale School of Scriptural Reasoning, were using at the time that they were beginning to write accounts that became canonical, meaning part of the canon in the New Testament. So she helped me so much because that's where I went. I went to the Septuagint. I went to the Septuagint and started looking at different reference books that would help me think through what words in the Hebrew Bible had been translated into agape in the Septuagint, what Hebrew words had been translated into the Greek word agape in the Septuagint, because those resonances, the sense that they're different, they're very different ways, that they're very different stories, very different words that became agape in the Septuagint that would have been, by one interpretation, I hope you've heard all those caveats, would have been the word that was then carried over into the New Testament canon. And as I went digging into those texts, I really could have written a whole dissertation on this, on just this, just the use of agape in the Septuagint. Probably someone has since, but I could have written a whole dissertation on that. I ended up eventually falling in love with the work of Soren Kierkegaard on love, and decided that the other dog is thinking about jumping up, but evidently she's going to consider not. My dogs like to dig into my couch, and sometimes if they want to get my attention, they really will, and they've destroyed some pillows. I'd rather that not happen. So hopefully that will give you some explanation. When I teach about love, I start with this story often because so many people think that the love commandment, the commandment to love, is something that they can figure out and have. They can have like in a toolkit. So I keep my glasses handy. I keep my toolkit handy. And when it comes time for me to see in a loving way, I pull out my love glasses. Don't dig. I pull out my love glasses and I figure out what Jesus would do, or what the Old Testament, I figure out what the word love means. And that's not the way that the word love functions in Scripture. A translation that tries, when translators translate Scripture, they're dealing with so many different questions about translation, from Hebrew to Greek to, you're going to have to ask Anathea Portier-Young all the other questions, because she will know. I didn't go into biblical studies. That's her love, and I I'm so grateful to have her as a colleague. I'm trying to think of other things that might be helpful to know. No, I think that's enough. You can look up Anders Nygren. Maybe I should, and again, I never quite learned exactly because different people said different things about how I was supposed to pronounce Anders Nygren. Well, here we go. I'll go ahead and just read you the abstract, although it's not very pretty. Remember, 1999. While some of Anders Nygren's critics supplant agape with eros or philia, we may best correct, meaning all of us? What was I doing? You know, you do your best. We may best correct the false simplicity of Nygren's account through a scriptural retrieval of agape itself. So I'm just interpreting the abstract here. So this was ongoing, as I said before, this was an ongoing conversation within Christian ethics at this time, an ongoing conversation about how to get to the essence of agape. And this was my intervention to say, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to figure out the essence of Christian love? While some of Anders Nygren's critics supplant agape, supplant meaning replace, agape with eros, which you can look up, that's another Greek word, or philia. So eros is etymologically connected to erotic, and philia is connected to words for friendship. I'll just put it that simply at this point. We, and again, I think that's funny that I wrote it that way, we, the royal we, may best correct the false simplicity of Nygren's account through a scriptural retrieval of the word agape itself. I suggest that this is still from the abstract, I suggest that this textual turn, meaning an attention to the actual original texts as best we can have them, may impart, I suggest that this textual turn may impart, reading too quickly. I suggest what this textual turn, a turn to the text, may impart by discussing agape, the word in the Greek that you hope you're following me. I can't see your faces, so I don't know if you're following me. I suggest what this textual turn may impart by discussing agape in passages from Exodus, Leviticus, Hosea, those are all from the Hebrew Bible, Luke, and John, 2 of the Gospels. And I remember vaguely somebody recommended that I'd better include some passages from some of the Gospels. Agape in these texts, the word agape in these texts reflects motivations as disparate, and they're, different, but it's a you can look up the word disparate, disparate, as disparate as passionate desire, parental longing, committed dutifulness, and protective seclusion. Depictions at odds, meaning depictions that are very different than Nygren's atemporal, meaning universal across all times, portrayal of agape as unmotivated and spontaneous. There's a long backstory there we can talk about later sometime. But so Nygren's depiction of the essence of agape is that agape, or the essence of Christian love, is unmotivated and spontaneous. Yeah, I'm going to save that for another video for general viewership. We may, this is continuing with my abstract, we may be called at times to heed or hear or heed and attend to one of these scriptural strains more than another. And a word I actually probably would use now if I were going to edit this would be we may be called at times to heed one of these scriptural strands more than another. Strains is also another word for a tributary, like strains. One of these particular stories that link together, concatenations. Yeah. I was probably dealing with a word count or even a character count at this point, but heed one of these scriptural strains more than another. But to say either that impassivity, meaning a lack of passion or a lack of, or being like that impassivity, or that was Nygren's reading, or any one of these motivations represents the apex of love is misleading. And this is the key sentence in the whole essay. I suggest that we resist the urge to condense our intentionally enigmatic canon. Okay, so I'm going to then hone in on this, and there's a squirrel on my window. Okay, hi squirrel. I suggest that we resist the urge to condense our intentionally enigmatic, enigmatic canon. Okay, I'm going to read back through this abstract quickly, but I'm going to highlight particular words. So if I were singing a song, I would highlight particular words using particular intonation and a lilt or a quiet or a scream. While some of Anders Nygren's critics supplant agape with eros or philia, we may best correct the false simplicity of Nygren's account through a scriptural retrieval of agape as a word itself. I suggest what this textual turn may impart by discussing agape in passages from Exodus, Leviticus, Hosea, Luke, and John. Agape in these texts reflects motivations as disparate as passionate desire, parental longing, committed dutifulness, and protective seclusion. Depictions at odds with Nygren's atemporal portrayal of agape as unmotivated and spontaneous. We may be called at times to heed one of these scriptural strains more than another, but to say either that impassivity, Nygren, or any one of these motivations represents the apex of love is misleading. I suggest that we resist the urge to condense our intentionally enigmatic canon. I hope that was helpful.